Hello, hello, hello. It's Ryan Ao here. I'm going live on Sacred Rebel today. Woo, woo, woo. Oh, where is it? There it is. Yeah, yeah. We're doing a restream again, so you can view this on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter for now. I'm working on getting it up on LinkedIn as well. It will not be available on Instagram Live for now, unless I was able to have multiple cameras going, which I haven't figured out yet. So these will all be posted as live videos, recordings to those sites. It'll also be having the audio extracted and posted to my Sacred Rebel podcast on all the major podcast platforms, as well as my website. So you can find that at ryanao.com/sacred rebel. But today, I want to keep diving into these deep topics of things like life between lives, which is what we talked about last time, and moving on from there into a little bit of the dream world. I had an amazing dream last night that sparked me wanting to share a little bit about that and what I think is happening with dreams right now during this COVID time. So let's see. Let's see. So how do I start going into some of this stuff? Let's see. Well, back into the first episode, I was talking about how I'd read this book called Journey of Souls by Michael Newton. There's also he's a PhD in psychology or psychiatry. I think it's psychology. And he did age regression with his clients to help them heal wounds from their childhood, traumas from their childhood, and accidentally age regressed some of them back into what he called the astral plane or life between lives. And so over 30 years of perfecting this technique and documenting what he heard all these different people who had never talked to each other referring to, which was often very similar, he was able to kind of map out the spiritual world or the astral plane or heaven or life beyond lives. So there's a second book too called Destiny of Souls. So I've kind of gone through just some of the brief idea of that book in the first episode. So if you want to watch that, if you haven't yet, that might help you understand. But I talk about things like soul groups and how we all have these similar people in our lives that are like we consider our soul friends or our soul mates. And there's often about 10 to 15 of them that are in our, quote, soul group that they described in these life regression therapy sessions. And so that's also kind of the basis for reincarnation because it's being scientifically proven now through his Western medicine style age regression worked that these people are living reincarnation lives. And even a friend of mine who's a nurse, Sarah Collins, has said that her work in the hospitals has really helped her understand that life is a reincarnation thing because some of the people she's seen on the deathbeds have seen white lights and talked about similar things. And as they've gone into the astral plane or the other world, she's started to see connections there that have helped her as a scientist believe that we do really live in a reincarnated life. So we'll be having her on as a guest in the future, we hope. We've talked about that a little bit online. So it's just interesting to me because I feel like as a spiritual person, I've also had to reconcile science and the fact that some of the scientific things that are happening are proving spirituality are really fascinating to me. So I'm going to get into a little bit more about these life between lives today. And then at the end of the episode, we'll get into what that kind of implies for what we're all dealing with on this more intense dream work a lot of us are going through right now during the quarantine crisis. I'm definitely having some very intense dreams that are kind of life-changing, to be honest. I had one last night that I'll just say right now was as powerful, if not more powerful, than my ayahuasca journey about 10 years ago. So that was pretty powerful, and I'll share a little bit more about that. But to get back into life between lives, I want to just give you some of the fundamentals of what this book talks about. They have, different chapters are basically broken down into topics. So you learn about what over 30 years Michael Newton was hearing from people on these one topics. So, for example, what it's like to go home after you pass away. They all say this thing about like going through the white tunnel, and when you go there, you're met by people that you feel like you've known through multiple lives. Sometimes a spirit guide is there. Sometimes your passed away mom is there, or your dad, or whatever. And it's very common in these experiences to also see a spiritual figure that you might have studied or been a practicing during the. So let's say you were a Christian and a follower of Jesus, you will see Jesus. Let's say you were a Buddhist and a follower of Buddha, you might see Buddha. Or if you're Islamic, you might see Muhammad or whatever. So it's kind of this general sense of comfort, welcoming you home with a lot of common experiences to what is personalized to you. So, and on that note, as we talked about last time, there are these soul groups. So you will be greeted by your soul group. And what's interesting too is that often you will have people in your soul group who are still living a life on planet Earth. So you may have passed on and they're still down there. So in that case, it's interesting that apparently our souls are at rest during the day when we're living, but then at night, when we're sleeping, our souls are active on the astral plane. So, depending on when you pass away, some of your soul group members might be in an inactive state, apparently, and they might not be there to greet you, but they would be later. So, like a night, and then of course, time is very different too in the astral plane. So it's interesting. Like they talk about how within literally an hour of a person passing away here on Earth, they might have already lived what would be equivalent to like 1,000 years in the astral plane. So again, like it might be very quick that you would see somebody in the astral plane who might be, quote, asleep or not present while you've been here on Earth. So it's pretty comforting to know that all the people in your soul group would be there or very quickly soon after be able to greet you and connect with you and, hey, what was your life about? And let's review it. Let's talk about it. What did you learn? So let's get to the root of all this. What is all this stemming from? I mean, if we are an eternal soul having a human experience and we do not die and energy is permanent, then when we pass on from this plane, we realize that this was more of an illusory realm. So think of it as like software being programmed in a virtual world, kind of like that movie, The Matrix, which, by the way, that movie was actually, I feel, disclosing truths that even Tibetan Buddhist lamas say is true. Like I have a Tibetan lama teacher who says that that movie is very fascinating to her because she said the filmmakers must be students of Buddhism because they're speaking to very deep truths. And it turns out they were. The Wachowski brothers at the time, who are now the Wachowski sisters, yes, they have transitioned their genders, both of them, ironically. They are very strong students of Buddhism, which means that according to this tradition, the Buddhist tradition, you are not really who you think you are. So you are not the body that you can pinch, right? You are the quiet space when you are in solitude and your mind is turned off or meditating or praying. You are the tiny urgings that you get that you often ignore, like, oh, I should hug that person, or I should give that homeless person something to eat, but oh, I'm too busy. So those are those urgings, those connections we have with this space in our hearts and our minds is actually the real you, and that's your soul. The person that we feel and we think about every day and that we have interactive thoughts with, and that's actually our egoic self. And the goal in this life is to shed that egoic self as much as possible so that we can hear more of what the soul is guiding us to do, because that soul is an eternal being and trying to evolve. And we're here as a collaborator with that soul in this body to learn the things that soul needs to learn to ascend or move onto other dimensions. So how did you get here? Well, you chose to be here. Apparently, you start off as a young soul from source. There's constantly new souls being born. And like I mentioned last time, I feel like that is source's way of experiencing the universe, because apparently, according to Matthias de Stefano on the Gaia show Initiation, really what the source is nothingness. It's a void. There's nothing there. And the source probably was wanting to experience more and than the nothingness, and created us all, or every living conscious being in the universe, whatever it is, whether it's a one cell organism, an alien, a planet, a tree, a centipede, or a human, or an alien. Every single one of these beings, source is getting to live an experience through that one being's perspective. And so there's infinite number of these beings throughout the universe coming back to source and bringing with them this evolutionary journey that source then kind of learns from. And I think you chose to be here, and in this life, as source has sent you on many different journeys through different lives, starting as a simplest life form, like, a one-celled organism or a plant cell or whatever. I don't even know what there could be on other planets, but apparently there are other planets with life forms on them, and you have been on other planets potentially, and you have made it all the way to being a human. So congratulate yourself. Apparently it's an incredibly difficult thing to become a human, and it has taken you countless lives to become a human, and you've even lived countless lives as a human, apparently. Although some of us are younger humans, and some of us might even be brand new humans in this earthly realm. Some of us are more advanced humans. Some of us have actually even advanced beyond being a human into other dimensions and shed our human bodies, but are bodhisattvas, which I said bodhicitta last time, but bodhisattva is the being that has decided to come back to the third dimension reality, or even be in the astral realm and guide people as spirit guides. But whatever it is, that bodhisattva has taken a vow to stay in a reincarnating state, or stay in a guiding teacher state for third dimensional beings until all of us ascend to the fourth dimension. And what a bodhisattva does is generate bodhicitta, and that's what the word I said last time. But bodhicitta is the energy that you are generating to help all beings come to enlightenment with you. So if you are a more of an advanced being, you might find yourself on this life maybe not wanting to engage in the mainstream world as much, and you might find yourself like a sacred rebel people, being more of a person that may be more interested in meditating, or like my wife Constance, doing psychic work for people and coaching them and helping them, and or just being of service to other people. And that really is the way to ascend to the fourth dimension, apparently, is to be of complete service to others. And so okay, so I'm getting ahead of myself. So we talked about it's a very precious gift to be reborn as a human. And generally, you've been on these journeys with your other soulmates. So you've all kind of journeyed together in these different lifetimes to advance to these higher levels. We also have guides, as I mentioned previously, who are very advanced beings who might even be beyond the bodhisattva level. They might even be close to getting back to source, or have already gone back to source, but have come back to guide all of us into how to be ascended. So I think what's important is that you need to know that these guides do connect with us. And a person like my wife Constance, who is constantly doing exercises and meditations and work to bring in her guides, will get a lot more contact with her guide than of those of us who are just so busy in our minds that we don't connect with them. And so they're a little bit less present, but they will bring themselves into our lives and sometimes knock us over the head with a lesson or whatever. And that is important to pay attention to. And sometimes you might not realize why you're going through this difficult life change or whatever, but it might be actually brought onto you by your spirit guide. And really the greatest lesson there is that you can actually get in touch with your spirit guide and ask them for help. And so that's wonderful. So for the 5 years I was deeply practicing a high Tibetan Buddhist meditation practice. Part of that meditation practice was calling in our spirit guides and asking them. And I do really feel like during that time of my life, which was during the Within Reach movie project, where I was biking across the country with Amanda Creighton, 6,500 miles to visit 100 sustainable communities, we really needed guidance on that journey, and we got it. We got a lot of help from spirit guides, and a lot of miracles occurred, and more during that short time of my life than any other time of my life, even now. Though I have to say, we are bringing in more help from our spirit guides more than ever, especially during this crisis, and we are seeing more miracles happen because we're doing that work. So I encourage you to find some sort of practice that allows you to get in touch with your spirit guides. And there's all kinds. I mean, you can do meditation, you can do yoga, you can just talk to your spirit guides. I don't know, Constance, what is a common way that people can start out calling in their spirit guides?
Through
Meditation. Okay. What else? Can they just simply talk to it or ask?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how would they hear or see any sort of sign that their spirit guide is listening to them or saying something to them?
They could ask for a sign.
They could ask for a sign. All right. What else? Could you maybe try to manifest something that you want and see if it comes to fruition? And then that might be a sign that spirit guides are helping. Meh. No. Okay. You don't think so? What do you feel like is a good sign for you that you have been making contact with the spirit guide?
Well, you could just. I just kind of can tune into that.
She can tune into it. How would a person who's not as intuitive as you, like, kind of take note that something has been going on? I was saying that sometimes when you're going through a really rough thing in your life, you might get knocked over the head really hard with a life lesson, and that could just be your spirit guide saying, wake up, get out of this state of not being awake.
Right.
Is that a good point, do you think?
Yeah. Just it's spirit guides in the whole universe.
Yeah.
Shaking you awake.
Sometimes I feel like when I'm really sad, I might get like a happy sign, like a hummingbird flies right in front of my face, or I'll be talking about somebody and they'll call, or I'll see a rainbow right at a time and I needed it. Do you think those are kind of signs that our spirit guides might be listening and watching and paying attention? Yeah. Cool.
And, there's spirit, all kinds of things, like even just paying attention to, like, there's a bug that you see that you feel really drawn to.
If there's a bug you see that you're really drawn to, that's interesting.
As like little spirit
they come as spirit guides. Okay. Yeah, interesting.
Or
animals,
like,
yeah.
You think you see a certain kind of animal, maybe you look at the spirit.
Oh, so she's saying if you see a certain animal that you're feeling drawn to, maybe look it up and find out what does the horse mean in my life right now, or what does a deer mean in my life right now.
Pay attention to your feelings, like that feels,
beautiful.
I'm drawn to that.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, if you're Christian, those could be considered angels. If you're Buddhist, it might be a spiritual guide. If you're a Native American, it might be animal guides. But a lot of different spiritual traditions tend to have a thing about spirit guides, especially the mystic forms. And every major religion actually has a mystic side to it. Like Buddhism is more like the Catholic side of that religion, and then Tibetan Buddhism is more like the Protestant side, or even more the Quaker side, like way out there, and Christianity has Quakers, and Islam has Sufis, and I don't know, every religion has something that is a more mystical side. And so I would say those mystical sides are actually doing things like trying to get in touch with the spirit guides, having some sort of meditative practice, some sort of way to really tune in to the universe. And the spirit guides are very important. Yeah. Calling them in. Yeah. Because when I was a Buddhist, I mean, I did a meditation for 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening. And the very first, actually second line of that meditation was calling in our spiritual guides, basically. It was like all the elders and the enlightened beings to come and help.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like in all forms,
Yeah.
Spirit guides could be like, it could be your higher self.
Yeah.
Your future self.
Yeah.
It could be, definitely. It could be someone who has passed. It could be just as an advanced spiritual being.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. So, okay, so we're going to move on from here. Thank you, Constance, for your insights into spirit guides. And if you want to come on as a guest sometime and talk to us about your work as an intuitive and what you do to, you know, work with spirit guides and how you manifest some psychic skills, we should have you on. Okay, sacred guest or sacred rebel guest Constance Ale coming up soon. So be on the lookout for that. So yeah, so let's see, where do we go from here? I have a you know a feeling that we're going to be talking about destiny of souls long into the future. There's just I've been sitting here at my desk sometimes spacing out on what to talk about on Sacred Rebel, and sometimes I just get a little bit overwhelmed by how much there is in these books, Journey of Souls. So I feel like we'll break it up into little pieces here and there and dive in more. And someday a topic might come up in my life that might be like, all right, here's a great example, and we'll dive into it. But today I can get into a little bit more about just kind of the basis of what our souls are doing here and what we're trying to learn. So let's see. So as I've mentioned previously, we have these soulmates that have been on the journey at the same level of us, apparently, and we tend to advance to higher levels together. And as we just talked about, we have these guides that are guiding us, generally individually guiding us. So, like even people in your own soul group might have different spiritual guides they're working with, because spirit guides and teachers, as you can understand, even in the real world, we all are drawn to different like pastors or spiritual teachers or mentors or coaches or therapists or whatever. So even in the spiritual world, we have different guides, even though we're on this journey, similar journey with our soul group. So these guides, can be coming from other dimensions to visit us, and are usually these guides are pretty busy people, but some of us may be feeling something going on in our life where they'll pick up on that and they'll know to come and help us. But we tend to do a lot of our work interactively on the soul level. For example, we usually tend to work with our elders in the soul world as we are coming into a life, to do things like choosing our parents, choosing what we will look like, what gender we have. And by the way, this is all still coming from Journey of Souls. This is not me just making this up. This is scientific method done work where, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people over 30 years were documented by this doctor of psychology. So they've said, we choose our parents, we choose how we look, we choose what gender we are. Generally, we choose the same gender in the human lives, but there are people who choose to mix it up a little bit. And both my wife and I feel like we have done that, mixed it up. I definitely feel like I've been a female in a past life, and Constance definitely feels like she's been a male in a past life. So that's interesting. You will probably know if you've ever been a different gender in your past life, because you will just feel like that energy inside of you. And I would say, LGBTQ people, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people have obviously been multiple genders in their past lives, because they're in this life balancing both genders. So that's interesting. I think that's really cool. In fact, on that note, there is this concept in Native American traditions and other native traditions like Hawaiian, indigenous peoples of all types all over the world. They don't have a word that is derogatory for like homosexual or gay. They have a word, they don't even really acknowledge that word in their languages usually, but they do have a word or a concept called two-spirit, where it's actually a highly revered status within the community, and those people who are balancing the two spirits, the two genders, are revered as spiritual teachers, and they usually end up becoming shamans or some sort of elder within the community, to teach us how to be in touch with the higher parts of ourselves that are genderless and gender fluid, and able to master bringing in the masculine and the feminine into one being. And actually, Constance and I had a great live on her channel the other day called Balancing Your Inner Masculine and Your Inner Feminine. So you can see that on her channel. What's your channel called, Sweets? That was on? Was that just your personal Facebook?
Yeah.
If you just go to Constance AO on Facebook and her personal profile, you can go into the videos section, click on the live videos, and probably find that. It's called Balancing Your Inner Feminine and Inner Masculine, right? Something like that. Yeah. And that was mostly in reference to relationships and how to, like, you know, learn about gender roles within relationships. So it was a fascinating discussion. I highly encourage you to watch that. So yeah, so back to the guides, and so they help us even figure out where geographically we want to live. Here's an interesting one. Even what planet we will live on. The books talk about that. Like, some of us have lived on other planets. Some of us have only lived on Earth. But that's interesting to me. So they even talk about, like, these other planets. There's like aquatic worlds, so we may have been an aquatic creature. There's these angelic realms. They're all cloudy and we can just fly everywhere. There's just fantasy, like anything you can imagine, it probably exists, I think is what they said in the book, because it's just an infinite universe, right? I mean, David Wilcock was even saying, and I should get more into my thoughts on David Wilcock in a little while, but like I really resonate with a lot of the things he says. And one of the things he says is that it's been proven now that there are more. Okay, so you've heard that there's more stars in the sky than there are grains of sand on Earth, right? Well, what's interesting is that they have now proven that there is more habitable planets in the universe than there are grains of sand in the universe. And so the chances are that there are life out there that exists beyond our planet Earth is just, it's unfathomable. And so for people to not believe that there is life out there is almost like egoic. It's almost like your ego saying, we're the center of the universe and there's nothing out there. Oh, yeah, really? Because there are more grains of sand on the planet Earth, or there are more planets out there that are habitable than there are grains of sand on the planet. So how is it possible that we are the only ones that evolved life in this entire universe? I think that's pretty profound. So with that said, when the people are saying in this Journey of Souls case studies that they've lived lives on other planets, that seems like a no-brainer to me. And I will be honest with you, I feel like I've lived lives on another planet. And I feel, and this is going to sound pretty hoity-toity to say this. What does hoity-toity mean? I don't know. Like, it may sound like I'm on my high horse, and I don't mean to be that kind of a person, but I really do feel like I came to this earth in shock at the conditions that we're living in. And I still have, and my wife feels that way too. I don't feel like I've ever really reconciled the conditions that we live in on Earth. Like, just money. First of all, I don't feel like money is something that should exist. I think money is too easily grabbed by certain people who want more of it. And I think all of us should be living in an energy exchange where we all contribute and we get a return for what we contribute. I think things like poverty and homelessness and hunger don't need to exist. And I feel like I came to this world. I remember being a young kid just crying about homelessness and poverty and hunger and kids not being able to eat in Ethiopia. When my parents would used to say at the dinner table, like, eat all your food because there's kids starving in Ethiopia. I remember times I would just cry at the table and like, what do you mean? Like, there's kids starving in Ethiopia. And then they'd like show us an article in National Geographic with these malnourished kids and, in hopes that we would eat our dinner. And I would just be like, why does that exist on this planet? And then, thinking about how we eat animals and, I'm a meat eater. I have to admit, I tried to be a vegetarian for many years and it was just hard for me. But like, it just makes me sad that we have to kill a being to be nourished. It's like, that's sad. Like, why can't we just not kill beings and be nourished? And I feel like there must have been another life I lived on another planet where I've experienced a world that was much different than the conditions here on Earth. But I feel like I'm here to help. And I think a lot of us are. There's this thing called star seeds. Well, you might have heard that in the New Age world. What does a star seed mean? Well, a star seed means just that there's people who have lived in other planetary systems, on other lives, on other planets, and they've been chosen to come here, even though they're probably have lived lives that are now more positive than that you would find here on Earth. But they've come back to Earth to help us ascend and transition into a better age. And I feel like I'm one of those people because, it's hard for me to not want to just go home to one of those other planets. I feel like Earth is not home for me. And I feel like there's a lot of friends and people that I've met on this planet that feel the same way. So, but yeah, so I feel like I chose to come back in this life at this time to help planet Earth come to a new level of consciousness. And I think that's part of what's going on right now during COVID-19. I think there's a lot of shaking up happening in people's worldviews and seeing that the system is not what they once thought it was. It's a broken system. And I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that we can do things a better way. Yeah. So, okay. So let's get into ascension. Let's talk about that for a second. Every time we live a life, we go before a council of elders after we pass on to that dimension. And these council of elders are maybe advanced spiritual guides or just old souls or advanced being. And they have no judgment, but in fact do a loving life review with us. And so actually there's a funny movie that I highly recommend you watch. It's called Defending Your Life. And Meryl Streep's in it. It's a great movie because it really resonates with a lot of the things in the journey of souls, in the sense that you have to kind of go before a review council board and you watch videos of highlights of your life and try to defend the decisions you made in those life. Well, the one thing that's a little different about that movie than what I hear is an actual reality in the astral realm is that you don't need to defend your life. They're not there to judge you. It's more about they look at highlights of your life with you, or maybe your entire life, because time is not the same there. You might even have time to watch every millisecond of your life together, because literally it might be just like, okay, we watched your life, and it's like, okay, what did you learn is really what it's all about. It's not about like, what did you do wrong? You're not allowed to go to the next level because you were a bad person. It's more like, what lessons did you feel like you succeeded in this life? And what lessons did you feel like you failed in? Or what work do you feel like you want to do in another incarnation? It is possible to stop reincarnating and advance to a higher level and become a spirit guide or even exist in other ways. And I think that's what happened at the end of the movie, Defending Your Life, which was kind of fun. And I think, even the Tibetan Buddhists talk about how we can stop that wheel of karma and move on and stop reincarnating. And generally, there's different paths you can take once you stop that wheel of karma. Apparently, you can live in a dimension that's just blissful. Some people want to do that. Some people need that. They've been, through enough trauma or pain that once they reach that level, they just want to be there. You can stop being there and come back and reincarnate if you want. And that's the Bodhisattva path. If you want to become a teacher or a guide, whatever, you can do that. But anyways, the point is that you can move on. And, but the key to being able to move on is just to not feel judgment. So in this life, it's the same thing. Like, we have to work on self-love. I get that. It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing even for me. But the key to evolving and advancing is just to not feel judgment towards yourself and to not feel judgment from other people, because our spiritual guides certainly are not judging us. And in these future lives or of ascension, and when we live in a fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional, whatever phase, nobody will be judging us. And so we will able to be in a world where we have telepathy because there's nothing to hide. There's no feelings of shame. And that's an ascended state of being. So, there are things in life reviews that are not judged per se, but that are looked at as, okay, that was a lesson you need to go back and learn. For example, suicide is apparently a not learned lesson from your life, and you will need to go back. You will be encouraged to go back on your own time, only when you're ready, to relearn the challenges that caused you to take your life. And then you can choose in that life to not take your life. And if you do it again and again and again, apparently, there will be some strong stepping in to help you advance past that decision, the continual decision to take your life. So you could read the books to find out more. It's pretty intense. I don't honestly remember all the details, but it's kind of like if they have to step in because you keep taking your life in every life, then they'll do this thing called like an energy washing. So basically they'll wash away all the traumas from your life, and you will lose part of your memories and your self-identity, but you will still be the same soul that you are. And if you keep doing it, then apparently they'll just have to do like a soul button reset where you basically just lose all your memories and start over as a brand new soul. So try to keep that in mind about suicide. It's not something that we need to shame people about, but I, ever since reading this book, have had a strong heart in helping people make different choices when it comes to suicide, because I feel like it would be sad for them to have to go back and relearn all this again. Some people, when I did my movie about suicide, it was a documentary film. It never got launched. It was put on shelf, but it was about Robin Williams and suicide awareness and depression awareness. When I did that movie, a few people did say some things that really shook me, which was that we shouldn't judge people if they decide to take their own life, because some people might be in such a dysfunctional place that it might be just kind of like almost like euthanasia, just like allowing themselves to be able to leave this body. And I think there might be some truth to that. And I think that our souls will be in a private conversation with our elders when it comes to suicide. It might be like, yeah, I was so dysfunctional that I literally couldn't exist anymore in this dimension and I needed to leave. And they might forgive that. That might be something. I mean, and again, it's not about judgment or forgiveness. It might just be like, all right, that's a good enough reason, you can move on. But like what I've heard from the Tibetan Buddhists that is very helpful. When we leave this life, when we leave this dimension, it's really all about what energy did we leave with. If we left with like, I'm running away, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm angry, any of that kind of energy, that is going to clue you into the fact that you might need to reincarnate and clear that energy. If you leave this dimension in a happy, positive state of being, if you leave with very uplifting energy, you're going to possibly be able to move on. I think in general, it's pretty clear that suicide doesn't leave with a positive energy. It leaves with a negative energy. So that's why it's pretty much looked at as it's a not learned lesson. Now, there are exceptions for sure, and some suicides might be able to leave in a positive place. So yeah, that's between you and your council of elders, apparently. So people were right when I made that movie that like we shouldn't judge people, and if people are feeling like they're making a really strong decision to take their own life and they're doing it in the right energy, and that's fine. We shouldn't say you shouldn't commit suicide. And I feel like during my time as a practicing Christian going to church, I was told by church members and pastors that if you kill yourself in this life, then you will go to hell. And now I have a hard time hearing that after reading Journey of Souls, because I don't believe there's like some sort of hellish judgment, like you're a murderer, blah, blah, blah. I think it's definitely not a positive thing for most people, and it can be a really bad thing. But I think also because you do hurt a lot of people in that process, but I don't think it's something that's worth judging others for. If they take their own life, if a person in your life took their life, my dad took his own life, one of my best friends took his own life, I don't judge them. You might go through a phase like I did where you're going through the phases of grief and death, and you might be mad at them, you might be hurt that they left you, and that's okay. But ultimately, it's not up to us to judge them and think, oh well, they're going to hell. It's really between them and their teachers on the other realm. So we can just take it in stride if somebody in our lives takes their lives, and of course go through the grief and the stages of grief. And I think we can pray for them and their souls to find the peace that they need so that they can ascend in future lives. And some of these people might be in our soul group. Like I believe my dad might be in either my soul group or a neighboring group. And the fact that he took his life might be something that I might, be working with him to review. And when I get to the astral plane, I really hope that I get to talk with him about why he chose to take his life and what that all meant for him and what he learned from it and all that. So maybe that's a way to look at it. All right, so let's move on from the topic of suicide. That's all very discussed in that book, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. So I think it's important to talk about. But yeah, so moving on, let's get back to the topic of what is ascension. So I think it's important to realize that ascension is just a higher level of consciousness, of being, and that we're actually all collectively going through that as a planet right now. We've all been, put here on this planet, or chosen to be on this planet, because right now is a really unique time in the history of planet Earth, in the sense that I think we're completing a cycle of consciousness and moving on to a new cycle. There's a concept called spiral dynamics. I talked about it in an episode that will be released soon with Paul Brooks, where we all evolve from more primitive states of consciousness into higher levels of consciousness. And at each level, there's kind of a marked transition moment. And we're in that right now. So right now, the level we're at is kind of going from this collective evolution that we've evolved to, that, we came from the lowest level of consciousness of being like cavemen, or like being a child with basic primal needs, and like getting those primal needs met, to then learning how to get along with others in community and have identities with other groups instead of just ourselves. And then we've learned to collectively as a society move into capitalism, and even entrepreneurialism, and having a system where we are able to individualize ourselves, but yet get our needs met through an economic system that is all collective. And now we're moving into a system where, like I had mentioned before, like money might not be needed. People have been talking about the universal basic income a lot more since COVID happened. And I think we're really getting to the point now, and Paul and I talk about this, where as a collective consciousness, I think we're moving into this idea of community. We're moving into this idea of co-creation. We're moving into the idea of we're all one. Whatever happens to one happens to another. So we all need to be there together. Like, I need to learn how to care for Trump as much as I need to learn how to care for my wife and my daughter. And everybody needs to be able to get their needs met. So that's kind of the next level. And there are levels beyond that we can't even fathom right now. But like, it's good enough to be able to be seeing the light at the end of the tunnel for our culture and society and world right now, to be seeing, oh my God, we really are on the verge of an ascension to this new level of integrating our whole society into a unity consciousness. And that's when we move into that, that's where things like telepathy will happen. We might be able to understand that, we can do things together. We can create whatever we want together with the power of our minds. And that power I've heard talked about as scientifically documented. When more people focus on a meditative thought together than just one person, you can actually create the impact for real. So, for example, there's a scientific study that was done on crime in Washington, D.C. and about, it was like 6,000 meditators all in 1 month every day focused on this meditation together about reducing crime in Washington, D.C. And then it worked. And then when they all stopped, so the crime went down after that month. And then when they all stopped doing the meditation, the crime went way back up again. So it's, there's lots of examples like that. So that's interesting. So I think what we're collectively going through right now will kind of create the basis for all kinds of topics we can discuss in the future on Sacred Rebel. Arsene, he says, I want telekinesis to happen. Yeah, I've been thinking about talking about telekinesis too. That's more of a moving objects with your mind, or levitating or floating. I have dreams about that. I've definitely had ideas that is possible. So I think that's definitely something that can happen. I think it all comes together with an evolutionary ascension. The third, ascension is also kind of looked at as kind of changing this planet into a heaven on earth. In fact, the third dimension is supposed to be a place where we deal with duality, or good versus evil. It's these lessons that we are supposed to be learning to reconcile and then be able to evolve into the fourth dimension, where in the fourth dimension, the earth will be more of a place where we understand a reality beyond duality, beyond good and evil. Good and evil will become a more holistic and integrated thing where we will be one with our shadows and our loving sides, our shadows being our dark places. We will just integrate those. We will accept those. We will not judge them. We will not be at war with good versus evil. We will not have anything to hide anymore. So things like telepathy, and I think, yes, telekinesis and all kinds of things, manifesting things with our minds. I think a world will be possible, and it will only happen with the whole collective being able to be on that evolutionary path together. So right now on this dimension, we're all individualized. We're all on our own individualized paths. We're all understanding the reality that we live in a lot differently. We all struggle with our own individualism. And I think it's not until we begin to understand things as a collective and how we're all tied in together that we will be able to evolve to the next level, which is why I really want to start discussions like this online. And our sin says, let's fly. Yes, I agree. We can fly. I think that would be the best way to get around. Who needs UFO ships? We can just fly there. Maybe create a little bubble so we don't get like birds in our eyes or whatever, but or get cold. Maybe it'll be a temperature controlled bubble, protective bubble. But yeah, so I think that world is coming and it is possible. So with that, I want to just stop talking about the journey of souls for a moment, and I want to close this discussion up, or this. It's not really a discussion, is it? It's a talk. I'll kind of close this talk up today with a dream that I had, and I want to speak to the dream world right now, really quick. I think I've been watching David Wilcock a lot, and a lot of friends, including Constance, my wife, and my friend Eric Brown, who's going to come on this podcast. We already did a podcast on the flip together, which you can watch. There's a lot of talk right now about dream work being really important. Even my Tibetan Buddhist Lama teacher says that, dreams can be like school. Like there can be spiritual lessons in our dreams. Sure, some dreams can just be gobbledygook and there's nothing really to learn. And then there's sometimes dreams are very important. Sometimes our spirit, if you want to get in touch with your spirit guides, honestly, the dream world is a great place to start. Before you go to sleep, you can ask your spirit guides to come to you in your dreams. You can actually ask for specific topics you want to explore, and it can happen. I've had this happen. You can say, I want to fly. I want to learn how to fly in my dreams tonight. There you go, Arsene. You can learn how to fly in your dreams if you want. So ask, Arsene says, I am not a conjurer of cheap tricks. Exactly. Like we can really learn how to do these things in the dream world and then create them in the reality that we live in and that we will be ascending into. So I think what I've been experiencing in the dream world though is more and more lessons. It's like the veil is really thin right now, and I feel like I'm having more and more contact with spirit guides and lessons that are just really powerful. For example, last night, oh my gosh. So I had a dream where it was kind of similar to that scene in Star Wars where Obi-Wan Kenobi was about to get hit with the lightsaber from Darth Vader, and he disappeared and he was gone. And what he did is he passed away by choice into the afterlife so that he would be able to help Luke Skywalker as a spiritual guide. And he said, what was that famous line in Star Wars? It was something to the extent that he said to Darth Vader, well, you can't kill me. I will just become more powerful. And that's exactly what I experienced in my dream last night, where my body felt very impermanent and very useless in this dimension. And after I passed out of my body, I saw my daughter growing up, and I was able to help her as a spiritual guide. I hope I see her as a spiritual guide as a very old person, though, because I want to live in this life with her for a very long time. So I hope that dream was not true in that sense. But I think what it is saying is that in the spiritual world, we will be able to continue to impact this world, or three-dimensional worlds, as a spiritual guide later to help bring people that we love and that we want to ascend to live with us in the higher realms. So I think the lesson there for me was just pay attention to um, the world that we want to create and how we want to impact this world right now, because it's very, very important right now to be impacting this world. So I think maybe the practical point here is, as we are going through these times of COVID-19, and some of us are still in quarantine, some of us are going back to work, some of us are still struggling financially with money, us, some of us are still depressed, some of us are still struggling. There is a way that we can reshift our mindsets about all this and create the positive world that we want. And I think that was kind of the point of my dream. And so I hope that you guys can all take away from this talk today that we are not who we think we are. The world is not what we think it is. It's all very loved. There's a lot of guidance here. There's a whole team of angels surrounding each and every one of us, and they're looking out for us. And it is, on this third dimension, a battle between good and evil. But what we're looking to reconcile is it all together, the good, the bad, the ugly, into a holistic perspective that will help us move into a place of unity and co-creation with the world. So with that, I hope you guys have a good day. Oh yeah, thank you, Arseni. If you strike me down, I will become more powerful than you can possibly imagine, Obi-Wan. So let that be your calling for the day. Go forth and know that if you are feeling struck down, it is okay, because you will only become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Have a good day, you sacred rebels. Talk to you later.